This is 135th day of Ukraine's resistance. This is Mediacentru Ukraine. We start our conversation with Mykyta Poturaiev, Ukrainian MP, head of the permanent delegation of the Ukrainian Parliament to the Parliamentary Assembly of the OSCE. Good morning, everyone. Shall we start with OSCE, which has enacted the Birmingham Declaration? What is it and why is it important? Well, the role of the OSCE will be reconsidered to boost effectiveness of the organization, as we have seen that under the rules and procedures of the organization, which was founded back in the 1970s when the Soviet Union was around, when a member state of the organization launches a war of aggression against a different member state, it turned out that there were no remedies to limit the presence of this aggressor country at the OSCE sessions, both at the Parliamentary Assembly level, where the delegations convene from the parliaments of the member states, and at the level of the Standing Committee, where the ambassadors representing the member states sit. So one major achievement of the summer session is that the Ukrainian delegation has very bluntly raised the question, and we also offered a solution and launched a procedure of making changes to the rules of participation of the member states in the OSCE, in the Parliamentary Assembly as well. And I hope already this fall we will see the action taken. And I will not voice them at this point and not to allow our enemy to build their defenses, but we will put in a system that will punish the country launching a war of aggression, a war of terror against Ukraine. And then this action isn't solely aimed at the aggressor state of Russia, but this mechanism will help impose sanctions on the countries that should choose to follow suit. But I hope no other countries will follow suit of the Russian Federation at the OSCE. So 3 declarations were made: the General Declaration, which was elaborated with the American delegation, jointly with the Lithuanian and Ukrainian delegations. It is a very severe renunciation of the war of Russia against Ukraine, the war crimes, the crimes of genocide, calling for the need to expand and extend military aid to Ukraine against the backset of more stringent sanctions. Yet another declaration deals with the violation of the rights of journalists, and unfortunately, it is a terror against journalists seen as part of the Russian-Ukrainian war, but also seen elsewhere in the world. And also, the key focus is laid on the war Russia is waging against Ukraine. And we know, unfortunately, that many colleagues, including foreign journalists, have died at the hands of the Russian occupiers. So this is an overview of the recent developments at the OSCE and what will be the outcomes. The resolutions enacted by the Parliamentary Assembly of the OSCE will then enable the member states to refer to the resolutions to elaborate a number of documents, and already similar documents have been drawn by the UN, the Council of Europe, now the OSCE. How is it going to help us in these darkest of times? This is an expression of the will of the parliaments represented at the OSCE parliamentary session, and when making such decisions, the government can legitimize the decisions that they are enacting. And the key two components are the military aid and the financial and economic aid and the sanctions, which are a crucial component. Another document that was enacted, it is the third resolution of the OSCE. It laid a very important focus to set up a special international tribunals to prosecute crimes committed by Russia and Russians against Ukraine. As we all know that the International Criminal Court is a very critical institution, and it has its procedures to follow. It takes time, and we wouldn't like to wait that long. So we keep calling for the idea of setting up a special international tribunal on the crimes committed by Russia. Moreover, we believe what Russia is committing in Ukraine is unprecedented since World War II, since the crimes committed by the Nazis. So we believe that this has to be heard by the Special International Tribunal, and this is also reflected in one of the three key declarations made by the summer session of the OSCE. And then I would like to go on and share about the developments in London, in the British Parliament. And I wanted to ask you expressly about the British Parliament, but still going back to the OSCE. You attended this parliamentary assembly. How would you estimate the overall diplomatic climate? How strongly is the Russian voice carried? Is the level for support still going strong? How would you assess this diplomatic climate at the OSCE? This climate is definitely favorable for Ukraine, despite the vicious pressure mounted by Russia on the delegations of the countries that Russia feels is under its sphere of influence to oppose the resolution that I had discussed, both at the plenary sessions and at the sessions of the Standing Committee. Not a single vote as a delegation was cast against the resolution, despite the vicious and incredible pressure that Russia mounted on the delegation, expecting to sway their votes. So this is indicative of the general atmosphere. As for the European countries and other major countries that belong to the Parliamentary Assembly of the OSCE, the support coming from them is unprecedented. Some questions were posed to the government, but at the parliamentary level, we have seen and felt incredible levels of support. We have talked to our counterparts from the European Union, from the States, from Canada, and we see robust support for Ukraine. It's multi-partisan and there to stay. What does Russia have to do with OSCE, and how do we change that? If you could repeat the question. What's happening with the OSCE mission to Ukraine? We know it had its issues, and what does Russia have to do with it, and how to be rectified? Russia, in a cynical and brutal way, has blocked this effort. This is a permanent committee of the OSCE member countries. It operates through consensus when one country can block a decision. And by blocking this decision, they are blocking the OSCE mission, and that blocks a number of projects. We want to restitute the operation of the monitoring mission of the OSCE in Ukraine, and currently Ukraine is blocking all the efforts, preventing OSCE from funding the mission. It's basically the OSCE representative office in Ukraine. Our relations with the OSCE are based on a cooperation memorandum, and it was ratified by the Ukrainian parliament back in 1890s, and it has a status of an international treaty. Not every country has done the same, and we have. And we have to thank our predecessors for this achievement. Because of this, and because of the gravity of the situation, and because of the steadfast position of Ukraine and our friends and allies standing with us, we will seek a solution despite the obstruction posed by Russia. We will manage to enable the operation of the monitoring mission. The solution will be found. And let's go back to the point we started off with. You stayed in the British Parliament. It was a heated day yesterday in London yesterday when the British PM resigned. What do the British members of Parliament have to say about it, and how will it affect the development of the British-Ukrainian relations? It so happened that we are at Downing Street at 10, exactly when Boris Johnson came out of the residence to announce his resignation as the leader of the Conservative Party, and he will stay as an acting prime minister until fall. We in Ukraine are upset that it has transpired as it had, but we now need to recognize that the British politics have they're working. The British members of parliament feel that the MP has made a number of major mistakes, and no matter how much we value the stance he has taken in the situation with Russia, about the war waged by Russia against Ukraine, there are certain requirements that the politicians have to comply with, and the politicians have to abide by their social mandate. The politicians have to heed the position of the society. Therefore, Boris Johnson had to accept this decision under the social pressure. And I'm sure it was a very difficult decision that he had faced. There were many people under the Downing Street 10, both the mass media representatives and the people. And as far as we've seen, they seemed dissatisfied with some decisions and actions Boris Johnson had taken, mostly to do with the internal British politics and developments. This is not in any way related to his stance on the war of Russia against Ukraine, on the international policy. This is a British domestic agenda that was at stake. Then yesterday we had a meeting at the British Parliament. We met the representatives of different political parties, both the ruling Conservative Party and the oppositional Labour Party, and we met the members of the House of Lords. So we had a very extensive dialogue, and we had a chance to share our ideas and positions. And I hope the journalists will relay this message to the Ukrainian audiences that we have received 100 steadfast support and assurances that the multi-partisan support of Ukraine is there to stay. It will go as strong as it used to. Britain is ready to step up its support to Ukraine in all the directions, both military and economic and financial and sanctions. All the three dimensions are there to stay and will only get stronger as needed and as the situation warrants. That's the first message I would like to relay. Secondly, there are a lot of potential candidates for the leader of the Conservative Party position, and the person to be elected leader will automatically take up the Prime Minister's seat in autumn. All those people are great advocates of Ukraine, and no matter who ends up in the Prime Minister's seat, will definitely be the person to continue the steadfast support for Ukraine. I would suggest our Ukrainian journalists and analysts don't get stuck on some names, as there are many candidates. Um, their potential number is assessed from 7 to 9 individuals, including some new faces, some young leaders who are rising within the Conservative Party from the younger generations. So I would say we shouldn't jump at the conclusions and limit the range of candidates and then be disappointed to see that one of the favorites wasn't elected to the leader of the Conservative Party and to the Prime Minister seat. As I would like to say once again, that the key takeaway from yesterday is that amongst all the people who will now be fighting in the party contentions for the finishing line to bid for the Prime Minister seat, doesn't have any single person that would be indifferent to Ukraine. It would not sympathize with Ukraine. It would not be prepared to continue the rough and tough anti-Russian policy and steadfast support line for Ukraine that has been brought in by Boris Johnson. This was a very important information from Mykyta Poturaiev, who saw the resignation of Boris Johnson firsthand and had a chance to talk to the representatives of different political forces who have given him the assurances that Ukraine will continue enjoying steadfast support from the UK. Our next briefing is coming up at 11:30. Thank you, Mykyta. We will talk to the participants and organizers of a charitable action to support the Ukrainian army called War Through the Eyes.